Two-level utilitarianism states that normally we should use intuitive moral thinking in the form of real utilitarianism because it usually maximizes happiness. However, there are some times when we must ascend to a higher critical level of reflection in order to decide what to do and must think as an act utilitarian would. This method is based on the view that although act utilitarianism may be favorable in theory, usually it is too difficult to perfectly predict consequences, and so we require moral guidelines or rules in the day-to-day life. Active utilitarianism states that our initial moral task is to inculcate motives within ourselves by means of teaching and repetition that will be generally useful across the spectrum of the actual situations we are likely to encounter rather than hypothetical examples which are unlikely to occur. It can be thought of as a hybrid between act and rule utilitarianism, but it also attempts to take into account how human beings actually function psychologically. Totalitarianism advocates measuring the utility of a population based on the total utility of its members. However, it has been argued that this leads to a repugnant conclusion, in which an enormous population whose individual lives are barely worth living is considered preferable to a smaller population with good lives. Average utilitarianism advocates measuring the utility of population based on the average utility of that population. The drawback here is known as the mere addition paradox, where bringing a moderately happy person in a very happy world would be seen as an immoral act, or the logical implication that it would be a moral good to eliminate all people whose happiness is below average, as this would raise the average happiness. Negative utilitarianism requires us to promote the least amount of evil or harm or to prevent the greatest amount of suffering for the greatest number, as opposed to the general or positive utilitarian rule of the greatest amount of good for the greatest number. The justification for the negative utilitarianism is that the greatest harms are more consequential than the greatest goods, and so should have more influence on moral decision making. Critics have argued that the ultimate aim of negative utilitarianism will therefore logically be to engender the quickest and less painful method of killing the entirety of humanity, as this would effectively minimize suffering, although more moderate proponents would obviously not purpose that. Sentient utilitarianism states that the well-being of all sentient beings, conscious beings who feel pain, including therefore some non-human animals, deserve equal consideration with that given to human beings when making moral decisions in a utilitarian context. In business and commerce, utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. As such, it is the only moral framework that can justify military force or war. Moreover, utilitarianism is the most common approach to business ethics because of the way that it accounts for costs and benefits. Utilitarian ethics. Rule utilitarian ethics. An example of rule utilitarianism in business is tiered pricing for a product or service for different types of customers. In the airline industry, for example, many planes offer first, business, and economy class seats. Customers who fly in the first or business class pay a much higher rate than those in economy sets, but they also get more amenities simultaneously. People who cannot afford upper class sets benefit from the economy rates. This practice produces the highest good for the greatest number of people.